You know, I gave this to you last time, but, you know, we weren't really in the mode for that time to talk about it. I don't even remember how much, did we do anything on this? All right, so
We
what I.
Q&A'd a little, but that was it.
Pardon?
We questioned and answered.
Okay, did I go over the columns, so you understand the columns?
A little bit, you said what wasn't in there
Okay,
necessarily.
column E is what it's filtered by. So don't look at the benefits and fringe package because that's just, and then the one that's vacant on your search is because she has a much, I mean, I could probably give you the total, I don't think I can recall it now, but she has a much more itemized list of what that is, which would be a lot more interesting to you than me just putting a raw number in there because you don't know how it's distributed. So, but I do wish you to know that E is what it's filtered. That first one is, you can see Garden City's right in the middle, and that's for a reason. So the 15 districts that are physically on top of that are the 15 districts that are directly lower salary. And the 15 districts that are underneath your district are the 15 superintendents that have it directly higher in salary. So there's 31 districts there, and it's only by the base salary, not by enrollment. Any enrollment can be in there, it's only based by salary. And then, of course, your WAC conference, you can see of the 4 school districts, part of that, there's usually 5. Oh, I wonder why, I know there's one missing, that happens to be Hayes. Did they have that copy from last time? Did you see Hayes was on that?
I don't think it
But
was
I-
because I
okay,
got
all
asked
right.
about
You still got some errors in there too, or questions that haven't changed on, like Smoky Valley, say
Yeah.
one in there.
Yeah.
Between E and F columns, and then Park City is listed twice.
Right, yeah, I remember you talking about that now.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's that information. So what I would I'd ask for you to consider, and please don't wait till your last interview. You as a board at some point need to discuss a range of salaries that you're willing to pay. And I'm gonna do a range, but I don't want you to think this is a recommendation because I do not recommend it. So I'm gonna be really ridiculous. You're willing to pay somewhere between 90 and 105,000. I know you are. I probably would not get anybody to sign the dots. But let's use that range so that we're comfortable, somewhere between 90 and 105. So board, come to consensus on that amount. Be aware of what your benefit package is. So when the candidates come and you offer and you say our standard benefit package, you'll know what that is. We would recommend, Stephanie, that the new candidates, the candidates that come for interview, all get a copy of your contract minus the amount of the salary. That way they'll see what the benefit package is. Now, if you want to change anything, now's the time. If there's anything in your contract that you do not, now's the time to get rid of that little sentence. Send it to one of our attorneys, and they'll be happy to look at it. And even if you say, hey, we don't like line 3A anymore, make that note. But if you want to get that done, I would get that done pretty quickly as opposed to, and even if there's not anything in there, everything's fine. You know, we're okay with whatever it is. It might be good that an attorney looks at it, and maybe your own board attorney, it's fine. Is there any language in there that is not there to protect the board? You know what I'm saying? And I love superintendents, but I do work for you folks, so I want you to be aware of that. When I make my recommendations to you, you will know how much those candidates currently make. So I will give you their current salary. So you do not have to offer each candidate the same. That's something the board can come to consensus on, that this candidate we can offer 105, this one I think we can get by with 99.5. But please do not lowball your candidates. They know what you're currently making. And yes, Dr. Carlin's been here for a long time, but they also know that your budget can hold that amount. And it is a superintendent's world right now. I hate to say that, so you need to be cautious on that. Be aware. The third visit, we'll talk a little bit more about the phone calls, how to make the offer, and that sort of thing. I don't want to get you confused tonight. Not that you would, but we'll wait till the third visit to talk a little bit about that. The reason I want you to think about a range, because when you're board president, when you come to consensus on your top candidate, you want to make that phone call as quick as you possibly can. And that if it's a really hot candidate and it's Friday night and you haven't talked about that range, it's real easy to offer, who knows what, and the next day you have regret, oh my Lord, well, I wish we would have talked about that. So I want you to make a good quality decision, not at the last second when you're really in a hurry and really desperate. Don't be desperate. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Anything about salary? Anything more about salary?
Is that, I just have a quick question. Is that, do you think that great bench number is actually correct?
You talking about the salary?
That was the earlier comment, you know.
Oh, no, that's not even close to being right, yeah. So that comes from, whoever fills that out, it's not us, we ask for, usually it's the clerks. But somebody in the district fills that information out for us, it's only as good as what we got, so. We hope it's accurate, because that's what was given to us, so. 331 is not accurate, I don't guarantee that.
And basically, both of those, 400 and 428 districts.
Smoky Valley had an unbelievable benefit package too, on paper. It wasn't anywhere close, it looked like great news. All right. Now, we need to talk about interview questions. So what I'd like, is it okay to continue?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Notice I'm trying to be nice.
Yeah.
Like you're in control.
I know.
I've done so many of these, I have to be cautious I don't go
That's
too
right.
quick, because it's
You're
natural for me. Interview questions, really important. In the back of your manual are more interview questions than you would ever ask. But there are some good questions in there. If you start going through that manual at a board meeting and try to come to agreement on the questions you're gonna ask, honestly, it's gonna take you 2 hours. So I do have a system I would recommend to you, and the board can say yea or nay to this. In the back of that manual, I would look through that as an individual board member and decide on the 21 questions. Jackie, if you were the only board member, what would be the 21 questions you would ask? And John, you would do the same thing. You would send your 21 questions to Stephanie, then she'll compile all of them. So if question 1A gets 7 board members, that's obviously going to be a question that's going to get asked. So if you don't do it that way, you're going to be at a special board meeting going through 90 questions and reading through them and go, yeah, I like that one. No, and it may take you a while. So does the board like what I recommended to you?
Yeah.
All right.
So that is your recommendation, submit 21.
21, yes ma'am. So in the back of that manual that I gave you earlier, if you look in there, there's a lot of the questions, read through those. Consider your characteristics. You know, if you want a great communicator, you ought to ask questions about communication, those types of things. Send your questions to Stephanie, instead of going to put you on the spot. I would recommend to the board that you get them to her in time that she can have them compiled, so you're not seeing them for the first time at the first interview. So with that said, is there a date you'd like to have that submitted to you?
How about February 25th?
February 25th, today's the 14th, so 11 days?
Yeah.
Okay.
It gives me a week. They have to come from that list, or?
They don't have to. So if you give them plenty of time, you know, if you put a question in there and it's not a stock one, that gives you a little time to talk about it. You know, that, yeah, I really like this one, yeah, so did I, but I didn't say it. Then you can come to a consensus on what you want to look through there and go from there. Another thing that we would highly recommend is that each board member ask questions during the interview as opposed to only the board president. So before I go any further, does this board like that idea, or do you just want Jennifer to ask all the questions?
I like that idea.
Well, I would recommend that all board members have that opportunity. So with that said, you have 6 board members, and will you have a 7th by interview time or not? The process is not going to get you that far. So if you would give her the autonomy to, your board president would probably do question 1, 7, wherever it goes. Usually by P, Davis, so you probably have 2nd, question 9, and with 21 questions, it'll be an odd number now since you get 4 questions now as opposed to 3. Now, the good part of that, if you would give her the autonomy just to assign those questions, when you're looking at all those interview questions a week in advance of your interviews or 2 weeks, now you know these are the 3 questions I really need to tune in on. What would be a good response? Not that you're not interested in all 21, but man, I can be the expert on these three questions. And it's a lot better look in the interview rather than the board president said, you do number 2, Mark. Danny, you got number 3. It's organized, it looks like you really planned this out, so it's a good look. Anything you can do to impress candidates is what you're trying to do. So it looks like they're gonna have those to you by that date, and then you would assign each question, probably put their name off to the left or something where they can see where it's at. Yes, sir.
Professor, I wasn't listening very close. What's that date again?
I'll let her say it.
February 25th.
Thank you.
And today's the 14th, Mr. Root. Thought I might want to give you a little hint on that.
Unless somebody has more questions.
The last thing I'd like to, the interview day is really important. So I'd like to give you some ideas on what an interview day may look like. For you, it's just an evening thing, so you need to have your evenings reserved for, I'm not saying you're gonna have 5 interviews, but if you remember the 21st through the 25th, you were willing to open up your calendars just in case. So it also gives you some flexibility on scheduling those interviews. It's very important. I will recommend to you that the formal interview would conclude the night, so that formal interview might be 2 hours long, and that's an executive session. So it would just be you and the candidate during executive session. Directly before the formal interview, we would recommend to you that there would be a dinner with the candidate, potentially their guests, and the board. So that might start at 5:30 to 6 o'clock. That is also executive session, because they will be telling you things about themselves that you can ask. And you'll learn a lot when you break bread with somebody, how they react. I take that personally on how when you spill gravy on your tie, how do you deal with that as a candidate in front of everybody. But they will be revealing things, so that's also executive session. Before we go any further, there's 2 things to consider, and this is probably Steph, we talked a little bit about this. You could have 1 motion for executive session for non-elected. If your dinner starts at 5:30 or 6, you say for 3 hours, and that's perfectly fine. But after the dinner, you have maybe about a 15-minute recess where the room's being cleared out potentially if the dinner's in here, and then you come back in. Or you can have 2, it's both legal, but you could have 2 motions, which I think's a little cleaner. You know, after the executive session of the dinner, you have a 15-minute recess, and then you have a second executive session. They're both legal. I just think it's a little cleaner if you do 2, because you're gonna have 15 minutes of, you're still in executive session, and you're in the bathroom, and better not talk about this, you know, all that sort of thing. So you can do it any way you want, but you might consider 2 executive sessions. I think it's better. We'd also highly recommend that you allow the candidate to have a meet and greet, a reception of some sort, at the very least with your staff. So if you can get your staff to a central location after school, I don't know what time that would be, but that'd be something you want to work out. Let's just say 4 o'clock. That could be a 30 to 45-minute process, so they have an opportunity that the staff can meet each of the candidates that night. Before that, there would be a tour of your community and schools. And when I say school in a district this size, I would highly recommend you do not go to every school. After a while, they all look alike. But you might consider a representative sample of your schools. You know, what's an elementary school you would like them to see? Or maybe not the buildings much, we're going to anything. That should not be willy-nilly, just driving around the town and hoping they see stuff. You need to consider going by your parks and recreation. If they have children, they're gonna wanna know that stuff. Do you have softball diamonds? Oh, absolutely, let's go drive it. Do you have anything where I can go fishing? Well, the Ark River never has water in it, but we have whatever, recreation things. Go by all of your parks. If you have theaters, I know you have all of these things. You can drive by the hospital. Things that are really important to families, you need to drive by. You might even drive by a house or 2 if you know there's a for sale sign on it. You might drive by the churches. Now, you're not asking them, hey, I've driven by the Church of Christ and the Lutheran Church. Golly, which one do I need to drive by now? But, they might say, hey, I know that you've driven by 4 churches. Do you happen to have? Well, absolutely, I'll drive right by it. You're not making a big deal out of it, but you're making sure they see the things that might be valuable to them as a family. So it needs to be planned. It's not just drive through a couple of roads. You might drive through, your feedlot. Your feedlots are really important to your community. So things that are really important to you, your community is taxing entities, you might drive by those. You need to meet our CEO sometime, and it happens to be, they're really important to our community. Hospital, medical centers, those types of things. It's really important, who is your tour guide? The tour guide can be your superintendent, but that is always a board choice. If it's not your superintendent, it needs to be a Chamber of Commerce director can do that. I know you have one, they can do that. If it's not your superintendent, you need to allow the superintendent to have some time with the candidates. If they're in the Yukon while they're driving around town, they can ask questions of the superintendent that you might guess at. You know, how's your LOB? Well, I think it's pretty good. You know, but the superintendent say, well, it's maxed out or it's not, all those types of things. But that's always a board decision on who your tour guide, and it's important on who it is. If it's not your superintendent, you should consider giving some time to sit down with the superintendent so those questions can get asked. I am not here to make a judgment on whether you think Dr. Carlin would be good at that or not. If you think he is, the superintendent's a good choice, but that is a board decision. I'm not getting in the middle of that. So you have to decide who it would be if it's not Dr. Carlin. We think it's very important in a district this size that they meet with your principals, your lead principals, you know, the assistant principals, meet for a certain amount of time. Your directors within your building, however many that might be, I don't know, I mean, you got directors, you got assistant superintendents, whatever you feel would be important there. And then, probably the office ladies, you can either include them with your directors, assistant supes, or have some of your really important folks that work closely with the superintendent have their own time with them. So there's some decisions to be made between now and your interviews, but once again, you don't wanna wait the day before when you're trying to decide who your tour guide is, who the meetings. I do have an example of a district that's very similar size 3 years ago that did a search like yours, that I'm not saying you need to copy it, but at least gives you a base and you can kind of tweak it on times and go from there. We've done a lot of good superintendent search for large districts, similar in size. This is just one that I happen to have this available to me. I could have provided some others, but I happen to have this one in my records as the clerk sent it to me. So this is not something, Mrs. Stanley, that you have to do in front of me, because please don't do it in front of me. But if you do have questions like, what about this group, or this, that group, I would also say to you that you gave your teachers and your other groups an opportunity for input today. You need to be cautious on, you are interviewing the candidates, so be very cautious in that, because what teacher you're gonna listen to, what assistant superintendent, what principal are you gonna listen to when you're making, they don't get the same background information you are privy to. They're making it just based upon the 30 minutes they got to listen to them at a reception or during the dinner. If you do want input, you need to be very cautious, but you would ask the following questions. Let's just say you ask the office lady. You wouldn't say, who do you think, who's your number one? It would be more like, what would be the strengths that you think this candidate would bring to the district? What might be some of their challenges? Because as soon as she says, well, candidate number one's my top, and then you pick number three, Julie Christmas, you asked me, and then you went, so anybody you ask, that's gonna be the deal if you ask them to identify 1, 2, and 3. So be very cautious when you're getting input. And I will tell you, there's gonna be a teacher that has an aunt or uncle that teaches in that district, you're incoming, and their aunt and uncle got fired. So they're the worst superintendent in the history of the world. Well, their aunt was the worst teacher in the history of the world. I'm just making a lot of stuff up. But you can see, everybody has a backstory. So you need to be cautious in that regard. When you make the phone calls, Jennifer, next time we're here, if this works out where they'll be here during lunch, you would want to make sure on the phone that you would offer, we need you to be here at 9 o'clock, which obviously means that we will have lunch for you. Some of the smaller districts don't show up till noon a lot of times, so we want to make sure they know, so they're not driving in from somewhere wondering if they should eat, or my schedule's so busy, I'm not gonna have a chance for lunch, so I better grab breakfast and buck one on my way through or something. You should offer lodging. We'll talk about it next time. She's already thinking about that. You need to offer lodging. When you call them, you say, we would love to provide lodging, and you can say, would you like to take it? And some of them might say no, but some of them are gonna live from a distance, so you wanna make sure you have it. We've also talked that the board needs to make a decision. even on this schedule, there is some dead time where the candidate and potentially their guest will have some dead time. Well, what do they do for that hour? Or do they freshen up for the dinner or the interview? So a lot of districts are just gonna go ahead and purchase any lodging, whether they spend the night there or not. They have a place to get away. They've been nice for 6 hours and they need to get away, get freshened up, kind of get their wits about them. So she would probably need some direction that, yeah, we need to have rooms, whether they say yes to the overnight, we need to have a place for them to hang out. But that's a board decision also for you to consider. I really hit you with a lot tonight. Stephanie knows everything. We've talked about this earlier. So what? The next time you see me will be when I bring the applications, will be an executive session, talk about the recommendations, and then we'll make sure you're ready to go. Counsel on how to make the phone calls, how to seal the deal, how much time to give the candidates when you offer. Those types of little minute, well, they're not minute, but you're not thinking about them right now, but they're gonna be really big when the time comes. Any questions for Gary on anything? Overwhelming,
Provided
isn't it?
great information.
It's overwhelming, I know. I have to be very cautious. I've done enough of these that I have to be cautious that I don't think it's not important, because, you know,
Very consistent with what we did last time.
yeah, very simple. You know, and I don't know about out-of-state candidates, but, you know, there's a possibility about flights and those types of things. If you get some out-of-state candidates that I at least think look like possibilities, I'll probably be contacting you to say, haven't done the final screen, but golly, they look really good and they live wherever. You know, we might need to, I don't know how that works.
Yeah, in this environment, I think we want to court them as best as we can if it looks like they have the qualities that the community and we are.
And that's why I want you to be prepared for the interviews and not wait till the last second. That's why we're talking about this now, so you won't feel so stressed out when it happens, that you're well prepared and ready to go.
So is it, I don't even know if it's allowed, but can board members put it on their social media that our district is doing a superintendent board search?
Sure, you bet.
Okay.
Like I said, I won't probably recruit because I work for every district and I don't like making people mad when I'm trying to poach their superintendent. But I take all kinds of phone calls from anybody that calls me. A lot of times I'll have them call the board office and they need some very detailed information that I may not have. But yeah, if you're not actively recruiting, but yeah, on my social, hey, we're looking for a superintendent. Anybody has an aunt or uncle that are looking for a job, have them go to the KASB website, vacancy link. Anything we can do to get more names out there. The bad thing is, and I'm gonna use you since you brought it up, that you recommend somebody to apply, and then we as a screening team, and then somebody goes, well, you're a board member, and you told me to apply, and I didn't even get an interview. You can see how awkward that
Right.
would be. So identifying somebody can be awkward for board members, and it doesn't work out perfect.
Anything else? I'm not sure what questions to ask at this
I
point,
know,
so.
you know, well, the things you want to start thinking about is salary range, interview questions, which you've got that process, your interview schedule, you got some meetings coming up, so it's not, but I would make sure superintendent search is probably the agenda item at every regular meeting that you have now, so that you can talk about your little details that you reminded me of this evening.
Another question I have, it just seems prudent, is that idea of having perhaps the board, legal counsel review the current contract.
Yes.
Is that something we can just go ahead and have done?
Please do. That way you're getting it done, you're not waiting 2 days before the interviews and now you're unsure. And if I met your board attorney today and she's very sharp, so if she looks at that, and obviously I know she knows our attorneys, if she would have questions, that's what our attorneys do. So feel free to have her either visit with some of our attorneys or she can do it on her own perfectly. I'm sure she can.
And then is that something we can go over?
And it's free. That's a free service. Please don't mind it.
And then, yeah, we could go over that in a board meeting then,
Yes.
if she has specific comments.
Notice I'm kind of packing up.
Yeah, like you're ready to go.
I was in Nashville, Tennessee all week. Family wedding. You know how hard it is to get to the hotel, to a church, and taxis or Uber and all that? Nothing's very convenient when you're 700 miles away going to the wedding. I am all here for you, so if you have a question or contact, she and I have been in constant contact since the last time I saw you. And if you have questions, you can either email me directly or go through Stephanie. I'd be happy to help you. That's what my job is, to make a difficult process as easy as we can for you folks. Even though it won't be.
Well, I appreciate what you've done because it lays it out nicely, even if it's a lot of information, so.
Very, very helpful, very helpful to the community, sounds like.
Yeah, I had a great day today. It's fun.
Thank you so much.
So I told you that my favorite day is today. When the next time you see me, I'll be honest with you and say this is my least favorite day.
Probably with homework and. Yeah, so, okay. I do have a motion to make. if we're
Okay.
ready.
Sure.
That's your first second.
Good turn. You make me good track.
Should have